Welcome to Cultivating Conversations. This episode, I'm joined by someone who is a business leader in the AgTech industry, Luboš Grepl. Sorry for exposing you, Luboš, but your career stretches back to the 80s. You've developed business for some huge companies like Monsanto and Syngenta, working specifically in crop protection and seeds. Today, I'd love to discuss with you your career, your strategies for business success, climate change, and how you help agricultural startups today with their business and kind of through your executive consultancy. So obviously we've been speaking for some time, Luboš, and I really look forward to doing this podcast with you. I know that it's something that we've had in the pipeline for some time. So perhaps if we were to just start by discussing your career today, I think it's always really interesting to hear how the journey began and why you got into agriculture in general, and more than that, what made you stay in agriculture?
Yes. Thank you, Steve. And you are right. I enjoy all of these times, and I'm still enjoying this global business space where a production and supply of a safe food and the fiber is provided to the nation and growing world. It is true that agriculture does not get a lot of mainstream attention, despite the public opinion is important to a future of agriculture as being a global food supplier. Many of farmers are receiving mainstream attention when something goes wrong, and there is a lot of disruption to the supply of agriculture product, which raise the attention, or the food safety is discussed in the public as a public issue, right? But we must continue to remember that the key role of agriculture plays in the nation health and in the maintaining the strong economy of it. So also the agriculture doesn't provide the food only at a daily basis, but it provides the livelihood for millions of hardworking individuals dealing with the great challenges in the diverse environment. So in terms of my inspiration to get into the agriculture, well, I would need to make an almost 4 decades step backwards to a former Czechoslovakia, where I was born and studied the agriculture economy faculty at the university in Brno. At the time, the principal government goal was to encourage large-scale farming that could benefit from modern technologies and powerful farm equipment. Consolidation of farm accelerated back in 80s, and most of the large cooperatives encompassed several villages and raised the varieties of crops and livestock. During that period, some achieved great yields. However, the uneven farm management quality contributed to the large discrepancies in performance between the farms, in addition to the lack of access to the modern technologies and the product innovation. And that's why, after graduating at the university, I decided to step into a local large cooperative farm with intensive crop and animal production, which was strategically focused on exploring the newest technologies, including the utilization of high-performing hybrids in the crop, or implementing conservation tillage practices, or on the other side, in the animal livestock, utilizing the embryo transfers to drive increase in the milk production. So that was my starting world when I started my career. The cooperative was running the enterprise management system based on its own digital platforms, and moreover, with the help of a strategically selected non-agriculture sidelines, enabled to provide a wide range of services to the other partners in the country. Well, pretty much an exciting startup role, but after the few years enjoying it, supporting the crop growing technologies implementation in the cooperative and with the partners, I became more and more interested to join those on the supply side, those who are leading the first tier supply of the crop inputs and the know-how, And I really was thinking how I could become a part of it, the part of the broader business expansion of those. And as the offer came from Monsanto to join them in the former Czechoslovakia, I was not hesitating, and I started back to '86 as a sales rep. And after almost 20 years supporting the company expansion and strengthening its presence in the markets, I accomplished my career as a head of Central Europe, leading several local organizations and managing the consolidated P&L of the combined crop protection and the seed business of the company.
Fantastic. And obviously you had great success at Monsanto, and as you say, rose through the ranks over those 20 or so years, and it turned into a really impressive career. Obviously, you work specifically in the Central European market. Can you describe the market conditions when you joined in the 80s and how they changed over the decades, Luboš?
Yep. Probably it is interesting to start with describing the impact of the overall microeconomic reforms back to early 90s, and then the whole transition process of agriculture sector in the Central Europe at the time. Most of the countries took their journey towards the economy and the land privatization. That was a key. With all them trying to achieve the right pace in the intensification and to be self-supplying the agriculture, food and the production. However, each country with its unique path given by some having favorable starting point of the large operations as being assumed advantage to drive the efficiency and productivity. Take an example, Czech and Slovak Republic, or some dealing with the millions of traditional growers universe, such in Poland and Romania. The whole transformation process was characterized by the changes in the employment, production, and other structural attributes. However, the most important dynamic was based on the ownership transfer from the former state and collective farms into the other corporate or private structures, where assets were based not anymore on the collective but on the private ownership. In essence, the land and assets property restitution involved the return of the property expropriated by the state to its owner, and this affected all countries in the Central Europe. The end effect of the process was encouraging the new rightful owner to move basically in the three different directions. The landowner could take the land back from the state and establish in their own farming unit, or to sell the land to the other farming operations or local investor, or happened in the most cases to lease the land while keeping the ownership but the leasing for a long-term period, in main cases like 10, 20 years, to private farmers or private cooperatives. And this, as you would expect, this journey resulted in the huge variation of the farm five structures. Nowadays, we have some market when you have a few hundred privately owned cooperatives or groups operating on majority of the Arab land. In some cases, even more than 80% of the country land. Take Czech, Slovak, or Bulgaria as example, or markets with thousands or even millions of small growers which are working on the land, but mainly for their own family or own individual consumptions, or for specialties production, like a veg or fruits and so on. Certainly, the privatization of upstream and downstream industries participated on the entire system, shaping up quite dramatically. The outcome of the agriculture transition, its adoption, required the mindset shift. So that was the next point to the having own land. Now, what you do with that, coming from the older time into the where you have been just asked, make the volume. Now, what is your mindset shift needed to entrepreneurship attitude? The farm managers making the profit-based decisions, having the management capabilities, having the proper operational excellence in the place, and access the innovative technologies are prerequisite, or have the ability to access it. So still going back to the question of regarding the changes in the market conditions, I can try to summarize the period being on the board of Monsanto and even Syngenta at the time. There was really a challenging journey while driving the execution of the strategy in the space of ongoing changes, the market diversity and volatility.
I think that's probably one of the really interesting things to us about your journey, is that really over the kind of the last 30 years, there's probably very few regions that have changed so much, and the markets have changed so much. Can you tell us a little more?
Sure. As we know, the diversity and volatility creates complexity, and that limits the predictability. So this learning triggered and I established kind of my own mantra in terms how I can manage the volatility, diversity, and inherited complexity by turning this into the opportunity. So how I can make it simpler. To manage it, it requires innovative solutions driven by our strengths, of course. The customer understanding, the grower, the channel, the right focus, but simplicity, but also flexibility and agility whenever the opportunity appears. So let me give you a few examples from the Central or Southeast Europe, from my largest geography leadership role. The territory I was managing consisted of 7 different countries, 14 different languages in the 4 major religions, different holidays, customs across the whole territory. The political and economical diversity is characterized by difference between the EU and non-EU countries, or where the GDP ranging from almost 80% of EU28 to around 17% of EU28 average. In terms of agriculture, anything can be grown there. What is grown on the continent, from the most common field crop like wheat, corn, sunflower, by the way, the largest crop in Europe in general, in the world, it's grown in this part of the territory, fruits and wine, vegetables, down to the exotic plants such as cotton and tobacco. Farming, as I tried to address before, polarized size and technologies available. You get the farm sizes ranging from the few hectares to 100,000 hectares per unit, like you get in Bulgaria. Technologies from basic generic crop protection programs to the utilization of the newest fungicides and insecticides technologies, or including the seed high-tech treatments, or the machinery when you have a tractor with a few horsepowers up to the John Deere's more than 400 horsepowers operating with the large machines. Growers using the most modern sprayers, drones, satellites, navigated harvesters. And importantly, when it comes to the volatility and the complexity, talking about the financial risk, where most of the concern of suppliers associated with. There are many of those, lack of local credits, the country default risk, remember the situation in Greece a couple of years ago, or general currencies risk, as we are dealing with the 9 different currencies, including the euro. So when you take all of this, it is difficult to have one fit to all, kind of a difficult model to address it. Such complexity requires deep understanding, innovative approach, but unique in its process of addressing it. So, and the next to that, and it is very important these days, next to the raising needs for more food and feed, hence the intensification driver in overall agriculture, the main game-changing factor in the last decade, and it will also be in the going forward, it's the climate change and its volatility impact. But about that, we will talk probably later on.
Yeah, I'm sure we can circle back into that later on. So whilst we're on the journey of your career to date, Luboš, obviously you took the opportunity to leave Monsanto and move across to Syngenta. What inspired that move, and what were you brought in to Syngenta to do?
Well, Steve, it was not that straightforward. So before that, I took another opportunity to support the local agriculture industry, but it's shown to be a step aside. And fortunately, for a short period of time, the expectations was just not met. So hence, I continue to be open for another challenges and opportunities in the global ag industry. And as you know, the corporate companies are announcing the major changes in the strategies, mergers, merging or acquiring, ready to undertake restructuring, providing resources for the growth and expansions. That's, you follow when you are close to the market. All of these type of messages going through are certainly creating the organization challenges internally, as I know from my own experience, but also providing the big opportunities for individuals outside in the market, ready for such a challenge. So back to 2006, Syngenta made noticeably clear to its stakeholders, whilst having extraordinary strong position in its crop protection business, will move to unlock the Central East European market potential with a seeds business of them. And me, inspired by that, I took the role of being invited to journey. I took the role of commercial lead of Syngenta seed business in Central and East Europe in early spring 2007. You would understand that joining competitor or rival in the marketplace can be challenging dilemma or end the roller coaster in your own mind or outside, but with the full belief with the vision and strategy combined with trusting and counting on the people in your new environment provides a lot of encouragement for the first big steps.
I think that's an interesting point to pick up on, really, Luboš. Obviously, with them being rivals, did you find there was a huge overlap in company setup and ambitions, or was it a completely new learning experience for you?
Yeah, right, Steve. Interestingly, in the first few months, the people were constantly asking by any opportunities like, how was it there? What was different? How they are different, right? And I think it was expected. I should expect that due to the fact of the rivalry syndrome and genuine interest to find out where the competitor or rival is better or lacking behind. Certainly, I could elaborate on my observations about American or European ways of doing business, the marketing or the company's cultures. I think I will pick up noticeable. There was quite striking difference between the European appreciation of discussions under the umbrella of various steering committees, deep but necessary elaboration of different options, potential risks, perceived challenges, in opposite to taking direction with the perception of possible, making decision and moving towards quick action and ensure correction after. I think you would recognize what I'm here addressing here.
Yeah,
but each company is different and unique in its ambition, strategy, portfolio, and the people processes. And I try to adopt and support as much I could, or challenge where I saw too much of unwanted complexity or inefficiency or process heaviness. So yes, the ambition to become market leader is always there. The key is how realistic the ambition is, and most importantly, do you have a necessary ability to rightly execute and drive the profitable implementation of the strategy? And that's what we try to do. You will probably not join the company to settle in your comfortable zone and build on overlaps or similarities, practically going into the same water. You want to build the new values based on something which is great, unique, by utilizing your own knowledge and competence, and bringing that strength to the next level, and helping the companies to grow.
Fantastic. And I think, as a kind of a grand summary of your career, then, what did you see at Monsanto and Syngenta that enabled them to keep up with the pace and volatility of the Central and Eastern European market?
Yeah, volatility and change, certainly, because that was the ongoing things happen. So you can be sure that every day something new is happening. In general, the answer would be close to the market, to the customer, having outperforming products and entrepreneurship mindset throughout the whole organization, and the right leadership behind. I get a very specific view on when the wind of change is coming. Some people are building the shield, some people are building windmills. And it was actually driving me through all of those. So whenever a change appears, I was just thinking, what is the opportunity here? So, however, this can be effectively done only through strong focus during ambiguities, during the uncertainties, ability to operate through the grower ecosystem, understanding its challenges, and at the same time to see and smell what are the opportunities. But understanding usually is not enough. The key is what you wish to have. It's the way, the ability you can architecture and design your business model, and the organization has the freedom to do that, and to be empowered to drive the implementation. And I think that was something which both companies got very much in the common. At the market emerging states where, all of the people were looking at the huge opportunity coming with the development there, I am reminding myself there was a lack of a financial means for the necessary investment to be carried for the adjustment of the large capacity technologies to farm holdings. On the other side, there was strong appetite for innovations in the sector, for modern mechanization, for modern technology, high productive hybrids, to produce the crops for the export. And it arrived actually as an invitation to the key industry players to develop new operating models, introduce innovations, but not in the portfolio, but also in the financing the businesses, invest in the local organization to develop necessary competencies to manage ambitions, but also to manage that type of volatilities. So it was about a major strategic decision of the side of a global agriculture powerhouses to get close, to invest, to finance, and to provide the most adaptable innovations. And for me, as a leader, was manage rightly the growth and the risk balance to the benefit of the companies.
Fantastic. And I'm definitely going to pinch the shield versus windmill analogy off you. So don't be surprised if you hear me using that in the future, Luboš. So after 30 years in agriculture, then you must have witnessed the impact of climate change firsthand. What would you say has been the biggest impact you've seen, and how has that affected your work?
Yes, Steve. There is a great challenge of volatilities, and recent studies are showing or suggesting that the many countries in the Central and East Europe are the most affected by the global warming. Let's take a few examples from the region. 2011, 2012, big droughts. 2013, damaging freezing waves in the spring. 2014, massive floods. And if you take the latest example of 2018, the crop vegetation was impacted by the extreme droughts in the Central Europe, mainly in Germany and Czech Republic. The average temperature increased significantly. And the yields were devastated, literally devastated by up to 80% in its reductions. Drought and heat waves, such were in back 2018, are expected to become common, I'm afraid, and will probably appear more frequently than once in the decade. It seems that the most of the farmers thinking, well, it was an extreme. I keep on saying, be prepared. It could become a normal. And the high volatilities, it's preventing the predictability. But you as a farmer, you need to get prepared for that. And asking myself the question where we can see the opportunity, it's when you combine this with the competitive environment, which is already historically competitive, given the intensification which is undertaken in the market, this place is seen as a battlefield requiring the winners to bring significant differentiation and efficient, pragmatic solutions. And this should trigger the companies and investments for inflow of the abiotic stress-resistant crops based either on the seed breeding but in the local conditions. It's a very important one to underline the local conditions as they were being derived there. Or deep exploration of the biostimulants, the biofertilizers crop management system based on of the big data. However, coming back to the basics, we need to ensure first the restoration of the soil health as a common factor. That's where all starts, with the soil.
Fantastic. And of course, we spoke about this at length, Luboš, in terms of sustainability being a focus for agriculture and AgTech going forward. Do you think we can combat climate change through agriculture?
Yes, the combat
question. Of course.
Well, yes, I mean, everyone somehow needs to contribute to it, right? And the combating climate change and all aspects are on the forefront of many institutions, organizations, as well industries and the farmers in the world. There is no simple answer, but there can be, and there is a great start to that already. In some countries, take an example, organic agriculture systems achieve equal or even higher yields as compared to the current conventional practices, which translates into the potentially important option for the food security and sustainable livelihoods in times of a climate change. The soil, its degradation, dropping or reducing health, and the limited presence of the life in the soil is a calling for strong revitalization strategies. There is a strong need for significant and sustainable transformation towards effective regenerative agriculture practices to improve all mentioned aspects, such as soil structure, the water retention, soil health, and fertility. So within the ag sector, I believe that everyone and each can. The point is how quickly and how dramatically you really get on it. I believe, coming back to my point, going back to the basic, the soil, the place under our feet should be one of the first focus. Next to the nutrition management dedicated to the reduction of nitrogen dioxide emission from the soil, I would mention the carbon farming solutions, and the links to the soil and its revitalizations are important to consider. There is a high mitigation potential in agriculture general, and very often nowadays we hear about the carbon sequestrations in the soil, and I believe that agriculture could be a massive contributor to overall carbon sequestration activities in this world.
I agree, and I think also, I think it's important to remember with agriculture, obviously, climate change isn't the only challenge. Obviously, there's lots of challenges facing agriculture today, isn't there?
You're right, Steve. There are a lot of challenges that the farming and entire agriculture ecosystem are facing. Farmers are under huge pressure and they must use all available technology to sustain in the turbulences in there. We can debate and talk about the fertilizer runoff and the consequent water pollution, which is so much of important for the general public. Pesticides at residual level are under permanent reviews and scrutiny of policymakers, but also in the middle of intention of the consumers. The food industry and consumers are driving the demand for the healthy food. Water inefficiency, it's coming with the agriculture, and the highest consumption is there among all of the industry, that's the fact. And the finally well-recognized issue in the recent day is a soil degradation, which has reached more than 60% of all soils. This all is about the sustainability. All those challenges we mentioned are impacting across the ecosystem, and specifically growers must respond to it. Adapting newest technologies, I mentioned biostimulants, biofertilizers, even biocontrol, and using all kind of practices, the regenerative practices, exploring also the other aspects like a digital space, and then so on. We can continue on that. But this is not only a growers. The key roles are playing the policymakers and policymaker settings of the new framework, such as this Green Deal or Farm to Fork programs in the new agricultural policies of EU. But here I need to say that the fast and effective registration process is the key accelerator enabling the growers to benefit from the industry R&D investment. And that was not always the case in the past. So I'm glad to see that more attention is paid by the policymakers to fast and effective registration processes when it comes to the innovations in the market.
I agree. And I think that interestingly enough, Luboš, it's kind of it. You touched on a couple of topics there, biostimulants, biofertilizers, and that kind of brings us to where you are now, operating in your own executive consultancy and supporting and mentoring various entrepreneurs, many of which, as I understand it, are tackling sustainability problems. What made you decide to go solo, and what's your main focus now?
Right. Following my departure from the Syngenta, I had a discussion with the support, placement support, which was provided, and I was asked about my list of what you want. But I was also focusing on the list what I actually do not want, and somehow I concluded where are my preferences, and hence I have decided to establish my own consultancy to provide my contribution in the individual way, inspiring with insights and providing pragmatic design, pragmatic advices you can implement to a large organization or startups or even management individuals to help them to make strategic decisions, but also standing by and support them when it comes to the implementation of it. Overall, the innovative and I should say also the disruptive technologies, development of new business models, development of new value capture mechanisms for innovations, operational efficiency, but still great appetite to support the introducing more simplicities in the complex environments were the key areas of my professional attention. And somehow naturally, supporting ambitions of evolving and growing startups to help them to claim the space within the big global agriculture market industry, it became my priority.
I imagine it's been somewhat of a culture change for you, Luboš, after so many years in Monsanto with Syngenta. I'm sure it's really exciting working with the startups on the disruptive tech, but also came with, as I say, quite a culture change for you.
Well, definitely exciting journey for me, and the learning journey, I need to say. You have to learn a lot when you do this type of change, and adapting myself into the new business environment, moving from your leadership positions, going into the advisory position, which requires a different type of skill and competence. But going a big bet that startups have accumulated a huge popularity in the last past decade, and lost a lot of entrepreneurs' dreams of launching a startup on their own. I read somewhere that more than 100 million of startups are launched annually, but I am sure that only some of them are having the impact to change the industry. In the agriculture sector, there are disruptive startups, and quite a lot, who change or kills the existing technology, replace or displace the conventional products. And the key for me is working together with them on building the strategic and tactical value of the product, of the concept, and of the offering in the market. What I'm trying to do is to bring the history and experience to the table in a complementary way, also understanding the frictions to reduce, coming with probably impatiences, coming with a lot of energies being put in there, where you need to say, hey, wait a moment, let's really work on the impact and how we're going to introduce this piece. The important is certainly, and that was my natural skill, is be transparent and tell them about the real concern you have about their business, and that's very important. But also asking them what they will do if the dream will become reality, and give them the understanding what may happen after.
Fantastic. And of course, I know you normally charge for this, Luboš, but what would be the most important piece of advice you would give to an AgTech startup?
Well, you should have the advisor with hands-on experience, but also who is very skilled at the art of advising. So it's not only knowing what, but also understanding how to communicate, how to say. That's very important. Looking for an advice is just you look at for the co-founder or investor, the technologies, the innovation backed by the intellectual property, its protection, the right business model fueled by investment is providing the great opportunity in the space. And that would be the another piece of advice of looking at the intellectual property piece.
Okay.
Look at the most startup models are sold. While most entrepreneurs hope to take their companies public like Apple or Google or Facebook, the reality is that most successful founders will eventually sell their startup to a strategic buyer. Having said that, the planning, the aiming point, as said at the beginning, and thinking what will happen when your dream comes true and thinking ahead is really key. The advice, if as a mentor, selling the company is one of the many ways to achieve the liquidity event. Alternatives to M&A, merger and acquisition, include venture capital for further development, continuing to build for a larger buyout. Utilizing your financial resources for the fast and the rapid development of a critical, convincing, and credible data is so important to support the claim of technology or product performance and its scalability. Data, data, and data. Those to be developed, however, in the coalition with the institutions and agencies which got the competence, the skills, and they are certified for that. Also, it is to import, as mentioned, the IP and finally to get the commercial success to be noticed in this space. Following this, you would be probably facing the decision to either remain on the early sell trajectory or to build your own business further, or even when the time will come and the company is attractive enough to sell a larger industry to sell to larger industry player at the right time, utilizing the M&A capabilities offered in the market. Finally, there are a lot of ways to approach a strategic buyer. There are some simple and straightforward strategies. One of those, and I think that engaging advisor in the dialogue process with the identifying buyer, you will be able to understand the buyer interests, its needs, requirements to proceed, together with your own inspiration.
Fantastic. And I guess that brings us to conclusion, Luboš. So thank you very much for your time. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will have taken tremendous value from your experience. I wish you the best with your consultancy. It's a real shame when people come up with innovations, but they just can't get the business side off the ground. So I think you're doing great work. Listeners, be sure to check out our previous episodes if you found this one interesting, and stay tuned to our social channels so you don't miss upcoming events.
Thank you, Steve, and wishing you all the best, and thank you for having me with you.
No problem. Thank you, Luboš.